Hello, everybody. This is Craig Cunningham, professor at National Louis University in Chicago. I'm going to use this opportunity to talk a little bit about the concept of unique potential and how that defines my educational philosophy and its relationship to democracy. This is designed to supplement the FND 510 course, History and Philosophy of American Education, at National Louis University. What is the goal of education? Well, if you look at the word education, you can see three parts. Education. E basically means to draw out. Duca basically means to draw, like to draw as in, pulling it out, sort of. And shun is a process. So education, education is a process of drawing out. And what is it that we're drawing out? Well, to answer that, we have to think about what is it that the young person has. When a child is born, they have their genetics. They also have the circumstances under which that they were conceived and nurtured and brought into the world, and their parents, of course. There's timing that affects the infant quite a bit. It's like, when in the life of the parents did the infant get born, or when in the life of the nation. The infant has a future. That's one of the fundamental parts of what we think of when we think of a child, as we think of that child growing up and of that child becoming something over the course of a lifetime. But the infant also has more than that. The infant is active from the moment the infant is born. The infant has some impulses or some instincts, some things that it is able to do. It is able to suck. It is able to grab. It is able to distinguish faces, particularly its mother's face. It's also able to cry when it's not comfortable, or it's hungry, or it's wet, or it's cold. So these impulses that every infant has, assuming that it's a normal human being, these impulses make the infant active. This activity is an interaction with the infant's environment. So sucking, of course, would be, an interaction with the mother's breast or the bottle. The baby's tendency to grab when you put something into its palm is obviously an interaction with things in the environment. And it, of course, becomes even more over time. Crying is an interaction because it results usually in some kind of response from the environment. And the distinguishing of faces, it's really important that the infant be able to recognize its mother. And I think that's why they have that capacity upon birth. So these impulses make the infant active. The infant interacts with the environment, and that interaction with the environment produces growth. So my suggestion is that we think of it as a unique potential. The child's potential is what is drawn out. The child has potential. Potentials, a whole bunch of potentials, is what's drawn out through education. When the potential becomes actual, when a potential skill or a potential appreciation or a potential profession becomes actual, then the child has grown. And because every child is different and unique, what they grow into is unique. The way they grow into that is unique. Um, every child has a unique potential, and that unique potential is both unique because every child is genetically different, but remember, the circumstances affect that child and the child's potential, and the experiences of that child, really beginning in the womb, but then going all through life. Each person's experiences are different, are unique. So experience certainly affects the potential. The potential is different at every moment of the person's life based upon the experiences and circumstances up to that point. So we've talked about schooling and training and education and the differences among those. Schooling, as we know, teaches every kid more or less the same knowledge and skills. We have standards, we have grades, we have, language arts and math and social studies and algebra, and these are more or less set forth in advance. And our hope is that each child will learn the material, will master the particular class, and then move on to the next class. Well, we differentiate, of course, but the differentiation in content tends to happen later. Certainly in higher education and beyond, there's a lot of differentiation. But schooling, it's more or less predictable. Well, it's more or less set out or set forth or planned in advance. Whether it happens or not is a whole other question. And we've defined training. Training is any kind of process in which the outcomes are predetermined. So, like if we want to teach the child how to do their math tables, we're not really looking for variation, and 3 times 3 is 9, 3 times 4 is 12, 3 times 5 is 15, etc. But that outcome, the outcome of training, is the vision of the adult, of the teacher, of the parents, of the community for that child. Education is something different. Education is the actualization of the child's potential, or the child's potential self. And when we write self with a capital S, we're distinguishing it from the actual self. The actual self is who somebody is at any moment in time. The potential self is kind of like the actualization of the unique potential, if it will. It's the possible self, the self that one could become. And so we can think of unique potential as being the capital S self. You can also think of it as a person's soul. I'm not going to go into that here, but I think it's a really good analogy. What we normally think of as a soul can be also thought of as a unique potential. Christians might talk about the Christ within each person. The Christ within would be equivalent to a soul, or equivalent to the unique potential. That which is sacred within each individual. Or we can think about the person's Buddha nature if we're taking a Buddhist approach. And every one of the world's religions has a similar concept. Thing is, unique potential is not something that we can define. We cannot say, this child is going to be a good sprinter, and this child is going to play the violin, and this child is going to be a chef. You could say that, but the actual realization of a child's potential over the course of his or her lifetime is really unknown. We cannot predict it. We can say what we hope and what we would like, and we can do what we can to help certain things get developed, but it's beyond our comprehension. Really, every person's unique potential is beyond our comprehension. And it's so much more than a set of standards, a set of outcomes that we list. There's something unique, there's something sacred and special about the unique potential of a person. So when we think about education, the development of a person's unique potential, what's the goal of it? What are we aiming toward? And we've also already said that we're looking at a growth. Growth toward what? Growth toward what? Well, John Dewey famously said that it's growth toward the capacity for more growth. That's what education is. So If I grow in a way that in the future I will have more opportunities to grow along those lines, then that's education and that's growth. But you can think about it more specifically. We can think that education is growth toward adulthood, toward agency, that is the capacity to do things, to make things, to envision things and then have them happen. You could say it's growth toward a destiny if you believe in that. You know, is the end point of a person's life defined in advance? Is there some kind of, you know, spiritual destiny that exists, or is destiny something that unfolds? And also, some people think about it as growth toward immortality. And, you know, you don't have to be religious to think that. You could think about the immortality of someone like Aristotle or Plato. The fact that they did things in their lives which keep them alive for us, in a way. So I want to introduce a Greek concept. This word appears in Aristotle's writing and other places. And the word is eudaimonia, or eudaimonia. And this is a really important word, I think, to understand the goal of education. And eudaimonia is often translated happiness in Aristotle's writings. I think it's a good translation in a way, but it really needs explanation. Happiness sometimes is treated as a momentary thing, like, I'm happy, you know. But if you think of happiness as being a happy life, like happy in a sense of fulfillment, well, eudaimonia works, I think. And if you look at the word, eu is like good things like a eulogy is good speaking about someone. Um, um, Euphoria is a good feeling. So eu is like good or harmony. The daimon, you could see the word demon in that, but the word demon did not originally have a negative connotation. So think of the daimon as being the unique potential. The higher self, the self with a capital S, is the daimon. And ia, euphoria again, a state of being in a good feeling. Euphoria, ia is a state of being. So eudaimonia is a state of being in harmony with one's higher self. So the self with a small s, the self we actually are, that self becomes more and more in harmony with the capital S potential self, the self, the destiny, if you will. And as we live out our lives, perhaps fulfilling our destiny or becoming the person we are, that's a state of eudaimonia. So a state of being in harmony with one's higher self. So if you think of happiness in that very expansive way, then we can think of happiness as the goal of education. Words like fulfillment, humanization, you know, the becoming of a fully human person. Individuation is a great word that Carl Jung, the famous psychoanalyst, talked about. Individuation is the becoming of an individual. The realization of unique potential. That's what happiness is. Now, virtue. Well, so how do we realize unique potential? How do we achieve happiness in our lives, a happy life? How does it happen? Well, through growth. We've talked about that. But what does growth require? What do we need in order to grow? Well, we need opportunities. We need, mentors. We need all kinds of external conditions for growth. But we also need internal resources, internal developments in ourselves. And it takes effort to grow, practice, repetition, wanting to do something, perhaps, work, it takes work to get stuff done. It also takes things like honesty, being honest with ourselves, being honest with others, having integrity, so, becoming a whole human being who doesn't divide up into different personalities. It takes courage to face things that we don't necessarily know or our fears, challenges. I think it also takes concern for others, because we live in a social environment, and if we don't have concern for the people around us, particularly our family, but our community and our uh, municipalities, our state, our nation, the entire world, I think we're limiting our growth. It also takes leadership and what is sometimes referred to as fellowship, because like you can be part of a group and take on increasing amounts of leadership, and perhaps eventually even be like a director or a president of a group, or a chair of a committee. But also fellowship. The chair of a committee isn't going to really have much of a committee if there aren't non-chairs like other people on the committee. Um, and service. I mean, service is a very big and very important word in a lot of sacred traditions. Service to others is such an important part of development, of becoming a good person. We can sum up some of these things and say that these are basically character. In order to grow, you need character. Now, this is complex because we develop character through growth, but we need character to grow. So it's a kind of like, mutually reinforcing process. Growth, character, growth, character, growth, character. You can also think of it as virtue. Um, Virtue is what makes it possible for someone to lead a happy life. Virtue is what leads to fulfillment. Virtue is what leads to um, uh, becoming a role model, becoming someone who is respected in the community, to becoming seen as a wise old man or a wise old woman instead of just somebody who just kind of sits in a chair. Um, so virtue is really a really key part of becoming a person. And according to Aristotle, who wrote about this a long time ago, virtue requires that we make good choices. We're virtuous if we make good choices, if we choose well. So what does it take to choose well? Well, when we choose, we might have this choice or that choice. Usually it's more than just two, but how do you decide A or B? Well, it requires looking at those, making decisions about what is entailed by doing A, what is entailed by doing B, what are the consequences, what are the moral reasons for doing A or for doing B, what is the kind of way that we put our duties to, say, our parents together with our duties to, say, our children, and all that. And in order to make those decisions, according to Aristotle, we need reason. We need the capacity to think things through, to deliberate, to play out a choice in our minds before we actually make the choice. And we get better at doing that over the course of our lives. Aristotle talked about practical wisdom developing in a person, the wisdom to make choices as one goes through life. And also he talked about virtue as a mean between excess and deficiency. This is often, called the golden mean in some treatments of Aristotle. An example would be like courage. Courage has an excess and a deficiency. The excess of courage would be foolishness. Like doing something without any concern whatsoever for the risks. That would be the excess of courage. And the deficiency of courage, well, that would be somebody who's always afraid of doing something new, someone who never leaves their comfort zone. So the excess is not virtue, and the deficit is not virtue. The virtue lies somewhere in between. And you can remember that with Aristotle's very famous saying, all in moderation. Everything in his mind should be in moderation. Moderate exercise, moderate roughage, moderate training in multiplication tables, etc., etc., etc. So now I want to talk about democracy. And I think that democracy represents virtue in a social arena. And let me try to explain that. And Dewey talked about democracy is more than just voting, more than how we get our representatives in Washington or Springfield, more than the politics or the kind of policy making that goes on. Democracy is more than that. And Lincoln defined democracy in the Gettysburg Address as government of the people, by the people, and for the people. And this is such a great way of describing it. Well, of the people means we're governing the people. So there's government that makes sure that the people are, moving toward progress, if you will. And there are other institutions that help with that too. It's not just government, but by the people. So it's the people doing the governing. And then for the people, what's the purpose of the governing? It's to benefit the people. So government which and think of it as bigger than government. Think of it as social organization of the people, by the people, for the people. So according to Dewey, democracy can be thought of as that social system in which each person has maximal opportunity to realize their capacities, while also contributing to the good of all. So it's a mutual thing. So each person's realization of their unique potential takes place within a social setting, and there's also social things happening. And if the society is thriving and moving toward an even more thriving society, and the individuals in the society are also thriving, there's kind of this synergy between that. The thriving individual, the healthy individual, the individual who is growing and learning and happy, contributes toward a society in which is happy, which is just, which is peaceful. And so that social system in which the individual is fulfilled and the possibilities of the social group are also fulfilled. But you can also think of it differently. So in order for a democracy to take place, each person within the democracy has to take into account the other people in the society. And a very good rule for making decisions is do unto others as you would have them do unto you. This, to me, is fundamental to a democracy. A democracy requires that each of us consider each other person in the democracy as equivalent to us, as of equal value to us, and we do to them what we would have them do to us. That kind of reciprocity and mutuality. I would actually say that what that really is love, not in a romantic sense, but love in loving your fellow human being, I think is what that says. So love your neighbor as yourself. And by neighbor, it's not just the person next door or the person upstairs. It's the people in progressive circles around you. So it's your block, your neighborhood, your city, your state, your nation, and then beyond that, the whole world. Can you love every one of your human neighbors as yourself? Obviously that would be difficult, but there it is. And the other way of thinking about it is in terms of like karma. What you do, it comes back to bite you, or it returns. You do something for somebody, and you never know when somebody else will do something for you. What goes around comes around is a great way to think about that. And in a democracy, if you think of everyone kind of not worrying so much about the tit for tat, or well, what am I going to get for doing that for you? But everyone kind of just pitches in. I mean, of course, this isn't ideal, but think about that in a family. When everyone pitches in and gets something done, or your friends all get together and do something like move you from one place to another. those kinds of acts of kindness for people you know, but also for strangers. Pay it forward is something that has become somewhat popular. Um, you know, why do you pay it forward? Not because you have an obligation to do so, but because it's a good thing to do. Immanuel Kant, a philosopher who everyone should know a lot about, but not everyone does. Immanuel Kant examined the do unto others as you would have them do unto you. He called this the categorical imperative. He said it's not something you can choose to do because doing it is a categorical imperative. It's an imperative. If you're going to be a reasonable person, if you're going to make reasonable choices. And he examined it and tried to express it in different ways. And he put it in terms of treating people as ends in themselves. Every person is an end in themselves. They're important because of themselves. I mean, not because of what you want from them, not because of what they do for you, but because they exist. And if you treat everyone as important, as worthy, because they exist, and never as a means to what you want or a means to what someone else wants, that would be a way of considering a democracy as well. And he talked about a kingdom of ends. A kingdom of ends would be a society in which every person is treated as an end in themselves. And so he did not say that democracy was a kingdom of ends, but I think that Dewey's vision of democracy is very much in line with Immanuel Kant's kingdom of ends. So where does this all lead? I think if we put these ideas together, we can come up with a kind of ethics, if you will, that an ethics, a set of guidelines for how to live in a democracy, how to make a democracy thrive. And Dewey talked about his democratic faith, his faith in democracy. And what is it faith in? It's not faith in something that is beyond experience or beyond the world. It's faith in the potentialities of this world, the potentialities of each person, belief in the value, the worth of every individual's unique potential, every group's potential, every type of person, you know, belief in the diversity and the value of diversity and the value of a society in which everybody's unique potential, everybody comes to realize their possibilities together, and that all of those possibilities are worth developing. But none of them is worth more than any other. Each person is, I would say, invaluable. You cannot put a measure of value on any person. You could think of it as infinite worth, or another word for that would be sacred. Every person is sacred. And that, you know, we need to make laws and we need to set up policies. We need to create institutions that serve each and every person within the society. And you can think about that as being limited to what's absolutely necessary, as somebody like Thomas Jefferson might. Or you can think of it in a more sort of modern liberal way, as, you know, institutions like the National Academy of Sciences, or the public library, or um, uh, you know, organizations like the Neighborhood Club here in Hyde Park. And these institutions are designed to benefit everyone in the neighborhood, everyone in the nation, or everyone in the city. And this leads to the notion of the public good, of doing things, of deciding things as a society that benefit everybody. Not that benefit this person and that person, or this company and that company, or this type of person and not that type of person. A good that benefits the public, benefits everyone. A park is a perfect example of a public good, a public park that anybody can go into, anybody can enjoy. Think about all the trees planted around Chicago. You know, our city's motto is, you know, city in a garden. All the trees in the park district, those trees are a public good. They give us oxygen, they clean the air, they give us shade. They're beautiful. They enrich the spirit. And also a belief in the future. A democracy really has to care about the possibilities of everyone. Most importantly, our children, their unique potentials. The unique potential of every infant, every child, every young person, every adolescent, every person in their 20s, every person who is going to create the future of not only the city and the nation, but the entire world. If you don't believe in the future, then the unique potentials of all these younger people, um, you're not really acting in the service of their sacred uh, worth as a person. And of course, schools as an institution. If we're not committed to our public schools, whether they're charter schools or whether they're, you know, small schools or special schools, but schools are a an institution that is a symbol of society's belief in the possibilities of the future. Now, schools could be different than they are, and schools could set different purposes than they do, but just the fact that they exist as institutions serving children is a sign of hope for the future. And I would say that a democratic faith requires progressive efforts, that is, ever-evolving efforts to provide and expand opportunities for every human. So now I just want to summarize. Uh, these key words: education, growth, unique potential, happiness, virtue, democracy, and faith. Education for growth, the drawing out of unique potential. Why? For the creation of happy people who live happy lives. And what do they need to learn? They need to learn virtue in order to grow. They need to develop character. They need to care about one another. And they need to learn how to live in a society that cares about everybody else, in a democracy. And then the faith to make that democracy possible. We really do need to teach our children that democracy is worth preserving. And we need to be passionate about it. The notion of do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Treat every person as an end in themselves, never as a means only. Love thy neighbor as thyself. If we could teach that to our children, then our future would be a bright one. Thank you, and let me know if you have any questions or comments.